Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this very, very special episode conducted by Grassroots Cricket. And we're going to call it Asia Cup Banter because we've got quite the ensemble. I'm your host, Behram Qazi.
And I'm your co host, Eman.
And with us, we have two Cricinfo superstars in Danyal Rasool from Pakistan and Andrew Fidel Fernando from Sri Lanka. So, gents, how's it going?
It's
Not too bad
it's
here.
going well. It's going very damply in Colombo right now, which I don't think people in the PCB will be happy to hear about. But yeah,
I was going to say it doesn't really matter how it's going in Lahore anymore because that the relevance of Lahore to this tournament is over now.
Yeah, I mean, we're glad that it was a good event in Lahore. Of course, one of the main fixtures, at least in terms of the gravity of the occasion and the magnitude of the game, was the Afghanistan and Sri Lanka game. So, Danyal, you were at the ground. There was a massive blunder, of course, by the analyst within the Afghanistan cap, who happens to be Karachi Kings analyst from previous season at the PSL, which is again a nice little subplot. So talk to me through this. Of course, as a spectator, we think that the analyst should be on top of this, even if the 37.1 over mark was communicated to the analyst. He or she should be cross-referencing, right, just to make sure that they have all those permutations at hand.
Some people might say that Karachi Kings Association explains a lot about Karachi Kings over the past 2 years, but I'm not going to mention it. I'll just move straight to the Afghanistan game. I think one of the things that invariably people started talking about is how much the ACC should tell the boards, because they do communicate Duckworth Lewis to them. And so a lot of people thought, well, they probably should have told Afghanistan and Sri Lanka what exactly they needed to do to qualify. I think I don't know if there's split opinions on this. I don't particularly agree with that because I think qualification is completely different to actual match conditions. The Duckworth Lewis turn system actually has relevance for match conditions, how many overs have been locked off a game. This is about what you need to do and falls under strategy, in my view. If you need to get a target in a certain amount of overs, then that's on you. Whether you want to pursue a 37 over target or just want to win the game, that's on you as well. So we at Cricinfo, I initially thought yes, 37.1 overs is the target, maybe 37.2, and then we have good stats people at Cricinfo as well, and one of those guys, Sampath, actually told us about 10 minutes before Afghanistan were due to get that target, hey, they could get there in 38.1 overs as well. And I'm sure he wasn't communicated to by anyone. He just did those calculations. So I'm sure any analyst that's with the Afghanistan team can do those calculations as well. I thought what was interesting was when Jonathan Trott was asked about it post match, he looked genuinely surprised. I think, until that moment, nobody in Afghanistan had somehow, at least the Afghanistan cricket setup, had somehow realized that they actually had a chance to go through, especially when 37.2, that particular ball, is the juiciest full toss from a spinner you could ask for, just asking to be put away. And when you defend that, you realize something definitely has gone wrong. I'm sure there'll be recriminations within Afghanistan, but well as they played and as impressively as they played, I think they really have no one to blame but themselves there, unfortunately.
Andrew, was it that hard for someone within that team management camp in Afghanistan to just, open Cricinfo or turn up the volume on the TV? Because, the broadcasters were talking about it, and as was the Cricinfo commentary.
yeah. I mean, cricket for commentary is a bit tricky in team dressing rooms because I think only the manager is allowed to have access to the internet for like anti-corruption reasons. But you are allowed to have the TV comms on in your dressing room. In fact, I made sure that I checked that was allowed to happen with Ranjan Madugale, the chief match referee, and he said they can have any feed that they want to, including the one that has all the comms. They could have heard everything the commentators were saying for the last 45 minutes before that last over. So I was surprised. I thought, but when I saw Rashid Khan sink to his knees when Mujibur Rahman got out, I suspected very strongly that Afghanistan didn't know, and that they'd got it wrong. And of course, Fazal Haq Farooqi, blocking out the next couple of balls, confirmed that. It was kind of crappy, like as a Sri Lanka fan, even just to see Sri Lanka win in such a way. Like, it was, you want the other team to be competing on the same level and to understand the all the, it's not fun to win in that way. I think even a lot of Sri Lanka fans felt very sorry for Afghanistan that they didn't understand all the permutations, all the different ways in which they could have got to that target. It was Yeah, I think I don't know what the repercussions will be for Afghanistan cricket and for the people in their backroom staff, but I do think that there should be some, because it does seem like a huge oversight. Like it doesn't seem like a minor thing. You're a professional cricket side. You're competing against the best. You're about to play a World Cup. You've got to be across this kind of stuff, and we knew it a long time. Like in the Cricinfo kind of groups that we talk about, we knew all of this stuff way before it got to the business end of this game. So why couldn't somebody in the actual team?
Absolutely. Do you think there's any Sri Lanka juju at play? Because the same thing happened in 2003, right? Throwing it back to that World Cup where South Africa did something very similar.
Look, I think that was South Africa's bad juju, and I won't go into why I think that was the case. The South Africa 2003 team deserved a little bit of bad luck. Let me just mildly say that but I don't feel the same way necessarily about the Afghanistan team.
Yeah.
I felt really gutted for them at the end. Yeah, Sri Lanka has twice benefited from this. Yeah, the incident you're mentioning is Mark Boucher needed to score one run off the last ball of the match, and they thought that just getting to that mark was enough, but tying the game was enough. South Africa needed to win, so he blocked out the last ball, and Sri Lanka ended up qualifying for the Super Sixes of that tournament. Similar scenes here. I think both teams in this case would have probably played it differently if they knew all the dynamics. Like Rashid Khan probably wouldn't have. Rashid Khan tried to hit a 4 on the last ball of the 37th over, but ended up getting an inside edge that went to 4 anyway. He probably would have taken a single in that situation and just tried to play the odds the next over. So I think it would have been a different situation. But yeah, it's still crappy for Afghanistan. I always love watching them play.
I will quickly say a lot of people at the PCB, though, gutted as everyone was for Afghanistan, were quietly relieved because obviously the PCB gets to pocket any gate money for the series. So insofar as any matches actually happen. And so having Sri Lanka get knocked out before the entirety of the tournament moves to Colombo is probably not the best way of maximizing revenue. So I think there was some element of quiet relief at the PCB that at least Sri Lanka had gone through, and the PCB could potentially benefit from some more gate money.
Right. Eman, you and I were talking about this earlier, that even though obviously the onus falls on Afghanistan's team management and analyst, from a broadcasting perspective, right, on the giant screen, you could have these permutations, right? And not for the players, forget the players, for the fans, for the spectators within the crowd. What do you have to say about that?
I did think that until the way Danyal explained it and talked about it as team strategy. And then I realized that would kind of be spoiling the plot. It's not, it would have kind of given Afghanistan an edge there, because not only could they have won on that second ball, they could have won pretty much the entire over. And so I think that I've kind of maybe changed my mind a little bit about that. But I did think that it felt a really tragic end, and that's why everyone was like, the broadcasters should have told them, someone should have told them, and it felt really kind of painful. The problem with Afghanistan cricket in ODIs, of course, is that people seem to write them out really easily. People think that, oh, well, one heroic performance from Gurbaz or from Ibrahim Zadran, who's brilliant, or even Rashid at the end, shouldn't warrant an ODI win because this isn't T20 cricket, right? You don't win because you win in a couple of moments. You win when you kind of comprehensively fight out different chunks of the game. But this was a very complete Afghanistan performance. I know that people were despairing in the first innings, but considering where they were playing, they were fine. The way they took on the chase, the way Nabi played was, I think, probably like the best knock of the Asia Cup so far. I know that we've seen a 150 and all that, but his was incredible. And then to see Rashid kind of fall to his knees while you're sitting at home thinking, wait, no, you can still win this. Why are you crying? It was just the worst. So I think that emotionally, I'm like, yeah, the broadcaster should have told him. But like now I'm thinking, yeah, no, Daniel has a point. Like logically, that would kind of spoil the plot.
If you don't know something you should know, there are penalties in sport for that. For example, if, for example, Sri Lanka had one fewer fielder in the ring than they needed to, it's not the broadcaster's job to tell the bowler or the umpire, hey, if you bowl this ball, it's going to be a no ball. That's just on you. And it's one of the things that captains and teams just have to keep in mind.
Yeah, very interesting. I also like what you said, Eman, about the 50-over format, because let's forget everything and just take into account that they had to chase down 290 plus in 37.1. Well, 37.5, but they didn't know that. So that's quite magnificent on its own that they got so close, right? But anyway, enough about Afghanistan. Andrew, I want to talk to you about this because you wrote an article on this, and I've been quoting you in different podcasts all across the board. your 90s nostalgia piece, because you've got a left armour who can swing it both ways. And then you have, of course, a right armour with a beautiful action who is keeping batters on their toes, and an out and out express quick who is rattling opposition. So talk to me about Pakistan's pace attack.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is the first time that I saw them live. You know, in the India-Pakistan game on Saturday, the one that where the second innings got rained out, and I mean, it's just box office to watch, right? Like just to see. They were helped a little bit by the fact that the rain interruptions came in, and then they were all fresh. You know, like the rain interruptions came in early in the India innings. And so your Naseem had bowled like 4 or 5 overs, and the rain interruption came in. You could go put his legs up, come back out half an hour later, and then absolutely bossed it again. Haris Rauf was like absolutely spectacular. I think that was the most like thrilled that I've been in watching fast bowling for a long time. Just the heat he was generating, you know, and the you could see live the things that. You can see, you know, when you're watching a match live, you can see the things that batters do in between balls, which you don't see on TV, right? And the kind of like the way batters try and hype themselves up to face another express delivery is different from when they're facing a spinner, from when they're facing a medium pace bowler. They know that the next ball is coming at them at 145 to 150k, and they have to kind of like just really psych themselves up to face up to that. And as experienced and as kind of like as seasoned as many of India's top order are, they were still like living in a little bit of fear. I think you have to be, you know, you're a human being at the end of the day. You've got something that's coming that fast at you. So I really enjoyed watching Haris Rauf's overs. I think there was just like an intensity about them that was really fun to watch, and to see India, who ended up giving up a couple of wickets, but some batters played him well. Some batters ended up kind of not doing so. That was definitely probably the highlight of the Asia Cup for me. That bowling innings that Pakistan put together. Obviously, a lot deflated when India started playing spinners, which they're very comfortable against, and then they kind of milked the bowling from there. But that pace attack has the ability to really thrill and to bring a stadium alive, which they did.
Absolutely. Danyal, you also wrote a piece today, and you spoke about how, Shaheen and Naseem haven't hit their peak yet. They're on the right side of 20, but Haris Rauf is going to be 30 in 2 months. So, yeah, just talk to me about the guy, right? Because you watched him live.
Yeah, so I actually was surprised when I found out exactly how old he was. We tend to lump these three together. I just assumed Haris was the oldest at 25, 26. And then I realized...
Well, Rambo thinks that. Rambo said on air that he's 24, 25. So there's that.
Yeah, well, Rambo once said to me, I have a gift where even when I don't do my research, I tend to pull it off. And I was too polite to say, sometimes you don't, Rambo. It's better to do your research.
He has the ability to pull it off. That's what he has.
Yeah, well, he has confidence. But anyway, with Haris, the thing that struck out for me was the beast sort of formed in my mind at the press conference, because he'd just come in after being named player of the match. He'd taken 4 wickets, and he had taken his 50th wicket in that game as well. And all he was asked about was Shaheen. I mean, I was guilty of that. The question I asked was also about Shaheen and Naseem, and then when I reflected back, I thought, yeah, this is something that I do. Everyone tends to do. And what struck out to me was how naturally the answer seemed to come to Haris. Of course, he had to talk about Naseem and Shaheen. He almost views them as... He might not be their mentor, but he still feels a responsibility to sort of take care for them, because at the end of the day, they're all young men, and Haris is a little bit older and has the sort of experience that Shaheen and Naseem don't. But then again, it's just that he understands so perfectly the role he fills in this team, and that isn't the role that will get all the glory. He's not going to get the new ball. No one seriously thinks he couldn't have done well with the new ball against India. It was cloudy, the conditions were perfect. He bowls faster than Naseem or Shaheen do at their best as well. So he could have done that job, but he knew that wasn't his role. His role was to come in after the first 2 and then maybe even bowl through the middle overs. He's more expensive than either of the two by a country mile, but we talked about giving batters licenses. He's got a license to do that. He went for 12 in his first over. That was fine, because his role is to just go through those middle overs when maybe the ball isn't doing much, when maybe you want to protect Shaheen and Naseem a little bit more. and his view to protecting them in a way almost extends off the pitch as well. And I thought that was such an interesting partnership, because in Pakistan, I think in South Asia, everyone who's worked in any sort of environment in South Asia would recognize, if you've got someone older than you who's perhaps not quite as good as you, they generally do not tend to be friendly with you. They generally do not tend to make things easier for you. That applies, I think, culturally everywhere in South Asia, maybe even elsewhere. So I think the fact that Haris shields them in the way he does and sort of accepts his second or third fiddle role, I think is worth highlighting. So I thought that's what I would go with this time.
No, I also think that Haris just, Haris is the piece that makes that trio better than the sum of its parts, because he brings so much to with his pace, with the lengths that he bowls. He brings so much to the game and so much into the batters' heads that you think, okay, after I play Shaheen off and Naseem off, I still have to face Haris, which is a thing that is constantly, I think you can see that in batters' minds, does play on their brains, because they know that there is another challenge coming that is different from these two, and to some batters is more extreme than these two. So Haris on his day obviously is really devastating, and you're worried that he's going to have one of those days. So I think that is a part of everyone knows that Shaheen's the amount of skill that he brings and the kind of sharpness that he brings with his thinking. Naseem, but Haris is that, like, if you're a coach, the popular thing to say, he's an X factor player. He's someone who brings something that makes everybody else better. And I think that's one of the really fun things to watch about this Pakistan attack, right?
Absolutely. Those of you who don't know, Eman is a super fan of the Lahore Qalandars, so I'm going to give her the stage to just ramble on about Haris and Shaheen and how, this bond, which even we saw in that post-match video that the PCB put up. Talk to me about all of that, Eman.
Yeah, no, it's obviously really special. I think there's a really kind of special joy that comes with being able to say LQ blood, or just something about Lahore Qalandars whenever they do well. And I that's why I always recommend new fans of PSL to just start following Lahore Qalandars, because you always have something to cheer about. And I think the brilliant thing about and I think Andrew really nailed it right now, because the brilliant thing about Haris Rauf is Shubman Gill the other day did whatever he could against Shaheen and Naseem in the beginning, only to kind of just have his stumps flying. His strike rate of 30 or something, because Haris Rauf came into play, and he couldn't survive him. And you can't fault the guy. He's young. It's his first kind of major tournament. It's like a headlining moment for him to be facing these pacers, and he's not going to survive. You're going to survive once against Shaheen. You're going to survive twice versus Naseem. You're not going to survive the third time. It's very unlikely. And I think that the development that Lahore Qalandars has done for Haris Rauf, people have said enough about it, but you can't really ever stop talking about it, because it's a gift to Pakistan, and it makes us even more excited, because, I mean, come next season, Multan Sultans is doing a lot of things with their franchise. Islamabad United looks to have a new look altogether. Karachi Kings and Quetta are doing whatever they're doing. And Peshawar, I'm hearing, has some interesting plans, but in the end, you're going to be Shubman Gill, no matter who you are, whether you're Babar Azam or whether you're Alex Hales from Islamabad United. So I think that, and if it was fun to see them do it in T20s for PSL, it's even better to see them do it in ODIs. And I honestly have it on good authority that allegedly this pace trio is the best Pakistani pace trio we fielded in this format. And that's not, discounting the 90s greats. It's just allegedly, in every time we fielded Wasim Waqar Shoaib or Wasim Waqar Imran, one of them was maybe just not at their peak. Right now, we see Shaheen and Naseem doing brilliant things, and like Danyal said, Haris is at his peak. I didn't see the 90s guys. I was a baby, but I liked the sound of that, because I grew up hearing about how great they were, and it's nice for someone to say these are even better. So, and again, Lahore Qalandars stacks as well, so bias is there.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's an interesting point you bring up, right? Because the whole peak thing, we all know Waqar pre-injury and Waqar post-injury were two different animals. So it's quite fascinating that you bring that up. And of course, you talked about Shubman Gill going at snail's pace. He was paying homage to Shea Hope. That's what he was doing. That was the entire plan over there. Anyway, moving forward, Danyal, there's been a lot of chaos with respect to the venue change situation. Of course, Andrew mentioned that Colombo, it's not looking too good over there. It's quite rainy. You were at dead center of all of this. And initially, we thought we might move it to Palekele, Hambantota. There were murmurs that it might come to Pakistan, but we all knew that was never going to
Yeah.
happen. Talk me through all of this. Like, what was all of this farce, and why are we still playing in Colombo? Because clearly, there's a massive risk of these games getting washed out or not being played at all due to a wet outfield.
I think if I never have to talk about the story again, it won't be a moment too soon. This is the reason. This is the reason I've had to see so much of Andrew in the past week or so. Yeah, so there's a lot of factors at play. Some of which Andrew will probably be able to explain better, especially with certain Sri Lankan angles to where these matches can be played. But from Pakistan's point of view, it was just about getting through these games. So Pakistan's first choice, as they've said a lot of times, is Pakistan. That's not going to happen. They wanted to play in the UAE, and there were reservations about the weather. So when Colombo was agreed upon, one of the reasons there wasn't too much to worry about initially, as I think Andrews mentioned, is Colombo doesn't tend to be as wet this time of year as it appears to be this time around. So when the weather forecast looked as dire as it was only logical to look at moving it maybe to Dambulla or Hambantota. But then once again, because you're dealing with the Asian Cricket Council, I think you have to essentially get every other board to agree, one particular board especially. And so they thought, the PCB actually thought they had managed to pull it off, and then were briefing essentially that Hambantota had been chosen as the venue. And that's when we decided to go with it, and we put up a story saying, yeah, Hambantota looks like, well, it looks like the likely venue. And the next morning, the PCB's view was that they had been overridden. That once that decision had been made, the BCCI had essentially told them that's not what was happening. They weren't moving from Colombo. Colombo's where the games were going to happen. The PCB aren't happy. Obviously, they'll be even less happy if these games aren't played. Like I said, they get gate money, they get broadcast money. That's going to be affected significantly, if especially the Pakistan-India game isn't played. There's still talk potentially of a reserve day for that game in particular, but as I understand it, that's not going to happen. The logistics of sorting that out are difficult. But yeah, when it comes to then where you host in Sri Lanka, Andrew mentioned there are a lot of complications that go beyond cricket with that as well. Yeah, but for now, all we can do really is cross our fingers for the weather, because I think the decision about Colombo has been made. And Andrew sent me a picture of how Colombo looks right now, and I'm not particularly optimistic.
Andrew, not all superheroes wear capes. Some of them, bring on the covers in Sri Lanka. That's how good that ground staff is. So, do you think it's salvageable?
Look, I predicting Sri Lankan weather is something that I absolutely will refuse to do because our forecasts are terrible, and like living in a tropical island, the weather is very changeable. As Danyal mentioned, this is not the monsoon season. Like, the monsoon starts generally like mid-October and goes into November, and so it's very early to be having monsoon rains. However, the rains we've had in the last few days feel a little bit like monsoon rains, which scares me a little bit. And I just fear for the PCB. I think the thing that the PCB is saying is, to an extent, fair. It is their tournament that they're supposed to be hosting. So other boards cannot take unilateral decisions on where the matches are going to be played.
Not
so
other
if
boards,
there was
just one man in particular, it seems, right? Daddy's boy, Jay Shah.
yeah, I mean, we have some information, but I won't go into it because not a lot of it is being corroborated. I think it's fair to say that Jay Shah is the person running world cricket at large. Not just within the ACC, a body of which he is president, but generally he is the most powerful person administratively in world cricket at the moment. I don't think that's controversial or in any way a thing that can be questioned. That's obvious to many of us. But yeah, it kind of leaves a sour taste in the mouth the way that decision was made. Yes, there are other Sri Lankan venues also. There's Dambulla, which if the ACC wanted, it could have fixed the lights there, and that's the driest venue in Sri Lanka at this time of year. They could have moved there. We're hearing that the India team didn't want to play there for whatever reason. They haven't played there for a while. They're a bit worried about the hotel facilities. Okay, fine. Then you also have Hambantota, which can be used. But in the end, Colombo was chosen. I wonder what is going to happen and what it means to the ACC in general and kind of for regional cooperation if the matches in the next few days get rained out, like what shape it's gonna leave the ACC in. Does it then become a organization that can't feasibly host a cricket tournament? That's a really difficult kind of thing to wrap your head around. If the weather clears up here and the remaining games go off fine, then I think we'll be all right for another Asia Cup. But then the future of the Asia Cup, I think, to some extent hinges on Colombo's weather, because the way in which we've arrived at these decisions has left the PCB very, very annoyed, and has been unilateral, as they say. And if it turns out that this Asia Cup is a dud, or the business end of this Asia Cup is a dud, then I think there is serious board fallout going to happen.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, the way they kind of dealt with the emerging Asia Cup for the women's, which was, I think, the first of its kind that happened this year. And for those who don't know, it was basically just rain. Pakistan got a grand total of 1.5 match in the entire tournament. Some teams played one. I think the finalists played maybe 2 or 2.5. I don't know. But the way it happened was the pitches were terrible. It was raining all the time. It's like they'd specifically chosen the rainiest stadium and the rainiest area, and it was the way it was there. But because it was emerging and because it was women, people were like, it's the first one, it's fine, they don't really care. But obviously this is the men's Asia Cup, it's the senior team's Asia Cup, so the way it's being handled is obviously rather questionable. And they have massive problems. You've got this ACC and BCCI struggling with the venue, and then you've got Lahore with its catastrophic light going out for 10 minutes. I mean, what's the ACC to do? I mean, one place is raining all the time, you can't play any cricket. The other place, you don't have light for 10 minutes. I mean, it's hard to choose where to go.
I think it's generally quite embarrassing for the ACC as well, because we often get told this is Asia's century, this is Asia's generation, because South Asia is truly the only place where people really properly care about cricket in a way they frankly don't in England, Australia, New Zealand. England, Australia care about the Ashes and then sort of move on. But then for if this is Asia's generation, then this is Asia's biggest tournament. This is where the ACC can really prove its credentials, and to show that none of them can really get along well enough to arrive at a decision where you choose to play games where it's physically possible to play games. I think it doesn't get more farcical than that. And as Eman said, it's easy to maybe think they don't care about the emerging cup, or they don't really care about women's cricket for now as much as they should. But then if you aren't able to organize the men's Asia Cup just in the lead up to the World Cup, and just can't arrive at a decision where you want to play where it's dry, I don't know what could be a greater stain on the ACC's credibility than that. And I think yes, like Andrew said, Jay Shah controls cricket at the moment. And this is where he was able to really show just how much power he has over the rest of Asia. I mean, Pakistan tried every which way to get that tournament moved. In the end, short of just either expelling India from this year's edition or pulling out of the tournament, they just ran out of options. They ran out of road. And for one board to be able to make decisions that look so poor in the larger interest of the tournament as well, I don't know if that reflects well on the BCCI as well, beyond just showing how much power exactly they have. Look what we can do. Beyond that, the optics are just terrible for the Asia Cup and for cricket.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like organizing or scheduling tournaments is, a strong suit of Jay Shah's. Anyway, Eman, you were saying something.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I mean, obviously, it also kind of just... if you thought the Asia Cup scheduling is bad, I mean, people are struggling with the World Cup. They just announced like 4 lakh more tickets going on sale, which why didn't they publicize that before? But that's a different conversation for a different day.
I wanted to talk to Andrew about the Naagin Derby. We had an underwhelming one. Sri Lanka absolutely, steamrolled Bangladesh in the first one. We've got another one coming up in Colombo. And based on what we've seen in the LPL, can we expect an actual snake at the ground?
I have very strong suspicions that snake was released specifically for viral video views. I think I have seen. To be fair, there is a snake that lives in around the nets area in that stadium, or there's a family of snakes. Perhaps I've seen them. When I've gone for press conferences and whatever, I've seen the snakes around. But going onto the field was like a bit of a step too far, because snakes generally avoid noise. So either someone let it free, or it was just a huge indictment on the tournament because no one stands, and so it was like a natural kind of the snake wasn't alarmed by the amount of noise that was coming from there. So
Maybe because there wasn't anyone there to make much noise.
yeah, that's what I was thinking too. So I don't know about Naagin Derby. It's like it is to me like the dumbest rivalry because there's really nothing underpinning it. There's no angst between Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. It's not like an India-Pakistan situation. It's not even like a Pakistan-Afghanistan situation. There's only good relations between the two countries. And for such a, like it kind of dominated the cricket between the ODI cricket and the limited overs cricket between two countries for a few years. Maybe we're on the wane of that, but it depends. I think if it becomes a heated match, I think the Colombo crowd will pull out their Naagin dancers. If it becomes like there's some one or two flashpoints in the game, then it'll spark up again. We'll have to see. The first one was too much of a one-sided match for it to really seem like a serious rivalry. But we'll see. I guess on Saturday, Bangladesh have been playing a little bit better since then, and Sri Lanka have serious weaknesses in their batting order, especially. So if Bangladesh can exploit those and bring the game a little bit closer, I think we might see a little bit of a resurgence of that.
Yeah, I mean, we surely want a close encounter. Also, just a quick roundup. I want everyone's thoughts on this. We'll start with you, Danyal, then Andrew, and then Eman. How do we all feel about Shardul Thakur as a third seamer for India? Because you've got Siraj, Shami, and Bumrah, right?
I mean, I generally found myself a little underwhelmed by the Indian attack. But then again, this is the first time I've really seen them in a while. I don't watch too much Indian ODI cricket. And then obviously when you put them up against what looks like Shaheen, Haris, Naseem, then that's what you're fresh off. And then you watch India against Nepal, especially in that first power play, and you saw Nepal take them for 65. And at that time, I thought, oh, Pakistan would probably have liked their chances chasing 266 around there. So I think in that sense, India have a few more vulnerabilities than I initially thought. I don't think I'd given it much thought. And I'm also a little confused about why. This is one of the reasons I'm confused about why India don't want, or the BCCI potentially doesn't appear to want a full Asia Cup. They need that ODI practice ahead of the World Cup as well, because they have weaknesses to iron out. And so that's really all I have to say about that. It's just my biggest concern for India is I still don't know how fit Jasprit Bumrah is. He hasn't played, other than I think a few games against Ireland. He hasn't really played competitive, high quality cricket for over a year now. And when you have express pace bowlers, if they lose even 3 or 4 Ks, that actually makes a huge difference. So I hope for India's sake and for any fast bowler's sake that he's back at his best, especially because India don't have the backup that a few other teams that basically Pakistan have, for example. And I think his ability to be at his 2021, 2022 prime is going to be key to their chances.
Andrew, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could have been like the greatest showcase of South Asian fast bowling ever. This tournament could have been, if the Sri Lankan teams had stayed fit. So Dushman Chamir, Dilshan Madhushankar, both out. Matisha Patiran obviously brings a little bit of round arm kind of dimension to the attack. Lahir Kumar is out as well. And and even the Bangladeshi teamers, Taskin, Hassan, who we saw, be kind of effective last night, and Mustafizur, they've got some decent pace stocks. And of course, Pakistan's, great trio. This could have been, one of the maybe the greatest collection of South Asian seamers that we've seen in a single tournament. But unfortunately, because of, the injury to Bumrah, with not knowing how good he is, them not picking Shami, I think like Shami should be picked over Shardul. My personal view is that Shami adds a lot more to the India. Yes, Shardul has a batting side to himself as well, but I would still pick Shami over him. Yeah, it would have been nice to see all of these pace bowlers at full flight in this tournament. It wasn't to be, but maybe we'll see them in the World Cup. Maybe this will be like a World Cup of South Asian fast bowling, which will be a different South Asian World Cup than we've seen ever before. So let's hope that happens.
Eman, any words on Lord Thakur, and then you can kick off your rapid fire round.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm no expert on Indian cricket, but when he was selected, when it was announced that he's playing the game, I messaged a friend and I said, "Why is he here? Why is Shami not here?" The answer I got was vibes, and it was just literally like, yeah, they wanted to increase their batting lineup, and I guess in that kind of way it makes sense. But when Bumrah wasn't here, from what I've seen, Shami was like the star of the lineup, and he is, in my opinion, their best bet right now. I don't rate Siraj too highly. Again, we don't know who Bumrah's doing. God help them. I hope he's good. But yeah, no, I'm not a big fan of dropping pure bowlers for bits and pieces players. Anyways, not in ODIs. I feel like if you need to get your 50 overs out properly, not muck around with 5 overs of this guy and 5 overs of that guy, maybe 2 from here. Yeah, so that's where I stand. Right, rapid fire. Okay, I love a rapid fire. It's a bit early in the tournament to do a really complicated one, so we'll keep it simple today. Who's your best bowler so far, your best batter so far, and your best fielding performance or fielder so far, rather? If you kind of, I'll kick it off actually, because I've been thinking about this, so I know my answers, and you guys can take that time to kind of think of yours. So my best bowler is pretty obvious. He's topping the wicket taking charts. It's Rauf. He's been brilliant, and like Danyal said in his article, and he said today as well, he tends to get outshined. But honestly, I personally love where he's come all this time. It's crazy that he's been playing for us for 3 years now in ODIs. It doesn't seem that long. It doesn't seem like he's gotten 50 ODI wickets. I don't know how that happened, but it's brilliant to see him doing this well, and it'll be brilliant to see him keep going in the World Cup. The best batter, I want to say Shanto, but he's technically out now. But I will say he's done really well. I did like how Nabi did, but he's gone now. I have a soft spot for Nabi, but Mr. President and all that. And best fielding performance is my personal favorite, Fakhar Zaman, obviously. Most catches, I think, so far, and took a few brilliant ones. Who wants to go next? Daniel, you ready?
My best bowler, well, I would say Haris, but I want I want a bit more diversity on this. But I'm just gonna go with Naseem. I think every Pakistan fan's heart dropped when he put in that dive on the boundary yesterday. And then the first thing you thought was, okay, he says he's okay, but it's his bowling arm. Is he going to be fine? But then when you saw him through his second and third spells, he was bringing out all the old classics. He was bowling it over 140. He bowled the short ball well. He bowled the Yorker well. He cleaned up the tail. So I'm just going to say Naseem because I've just generally been impressed by him. I thought he was a little unlucky against India not to pick up more wickets, basically. They do well in that first power play. So I'm just going to go Naseem there. Best batter, I am going to base on one inning simply because of how wrong I was. When I saw Mehdi Hassan Miraz opening the batting there, I just really didn't think it would work against Afghanistan. And he looked to be struggling. Bangladesh have said they want to target the first power play, the first 10 overs, because that's what all the other modern ODI teams do. And I think they've tried to do that. To their credit, they tried to do that against Pakistan even when they were losing wickets. So when Mehdi struggled initially against Afghanistan, but then he got to that 100, he scored that, he played that amazing innings. I just thought, yeah, that was an inning that proved me wrong. I would never in a million years have picked Mehdi to do what he was sent out to do. Best fielder, I don't know if I should go for a Pakistani here. I think I'm going to go on potential rather than what I've actually seen. I think there's so much to like about how Shadab throws himself around and how well he's done in against Afghanistan. I just feel like there's a big moment coming with him because there's a lot of focus around Shadab, the all-rounder. He's bowling at the moment. Potentially there's criticism around how he tends to go flat when he's under pressure a little bit. But then he has this ability to pull out these moments in the field that can galvanize any team. And I haven't seen any of that here. I saw some against Afghanistan. I just feel like something like that is waiting to happen if we actually do get any cricket in the second round. So I'm just going to throw that out on potential.
I think he took a really good one versus India, didn't he? I remember screaming. I think I tweeted something like, "You're 10% forgiven, Shadab," because he was bowling terribly at that time. I think he took a really good one, but it wasn't exactly a scream. It wasn't a Shadab level screamer. It was just a good one,
Yeah,
But
yeah. Well, there you go.
All right, Andrew, you're up next.
Okay, so I have a two-parter for the bowlers. My favorite bowler to watch so far, Haris Rauf, for reasons I've explained earlier in the show. But I think Mahesh Theekshana is also someone who did pretty well in the first match against Bangladesh, just bowls at all stages of an innings, does anything that he's asked to do, and is primed, I think, to have a really good back end of this Asia Cup. And I would back him, particularly on this Colombo track, if we get some matches here, which is, it tends to be slower, tends to be a bit more spin friendly, would be perfect conditions for him. I would say watch out for him in the next few matches. Batting wise, Nabi's innings, took Afghanistan from a pretty crappy situation to one where they, it just completely expanded their possibilities. So I would pick that as my favorite innings. Ishan Kishan hit a really good innings as well against Pakistan. Hardik Pandya also did really well, like close runners up. But Nabi is just spectacular hitting. Has to take that one out for me. And then the fielding event that I would pick is Dushan Hemantha, who's a sub fielder for Sri Lanka. And Sri Lanka do this thing, by the way. Everybody should watch out for it. When they take their weak fielders on and put their really strong sub fielders on just at the right times. And they've been doing this for like 2 or 3 years. There was one guy, Ashen Bandara, who was in the team essentially for his fielding in the squad. And they would just put him on at the right time, put him in key positions. He'd make so many saves. And so I think Sri Lanka are starting to use this as a serious strategy. And, I don't want to tell on them too much, but that Dushan Hemantha catch to get Nabi out was it Hashmatullah? It was one of the 2 key Afghanistan batters on the square leg fence. Yeah, I think it was Hashmat actually. But yeah, that was probably my favorite catch of the tournament so far.
Yeah, I think the Nabi catch, who was it before that? I think the Nabi catch was DDS. It was Dhananjaya De Silva, if I can recall correctly.
Oh yeah, that's right. That was that long on.
Yeah, I'll keep it quick. My best batter is my man, Nazmul Hasan Shanto, because he's been phenomenal for Bangladesh all year. And it's not just these 2 innings, but he's been getting runs at number 3. And he's been mediocre for the best part of his career, right? So him coming good, I think, even though he's out injured, I'm going to go with him. Best bowler, you guys have picked literally everyone. I'm going to go with Naseem, just because I feel like the figures don't do justice to how well Naseem bowls. So he's my pick for best bowler, and best fielder, like Eman said, for me as well, is Fakhar Zaman, just based on that catch really that he took versus Nepal, I think, off Shadab's bowling, and Shadab's reaction told you everything. Anyway, it's been a great show. We're going to end it with one final thing. I obviously want to ask Andrew this because we've never had a Pakistan-India Asia Cup final. So tell us why Sri Lanka is going to deprive us of that again.
I mean, it could be Bangladesh. It could be Bangladesh to deprive. I would, in fact, right now, I'd probably say my money is more on Bangladesh than Sri Lanka, just because I think Sri Lanka have a lot of things that they need to work out. But why Sri Lanka would? I think if Sri Lanka have a great attack. Look, they have a potentially great attack. If Matisha Pathirana really hits his straps in the next few matches and finds a radar, he's one of the fastest and one of the hardest to pick, and we can absolutely blast through a lower order. Mahesh Theekshana, as I've said, really, really solid bowler, has a really good record so far. And then they've got a really good supporting cast. Kasun Raditha was really good in that match against Bangladesh. Swings it early on, so there's a bit of kind of weather around. There's some movement to be gained. I think if Sri Lanka are going to make it far in this tournament, it's going to be because of their attack, which has bailed out their batting. And also, they've won 13 matches in a row. By the way, they've won 30 matches in a row so far. A lot of those are in the World Cup qualifier, so take that with a large grain of salt. But there is a version of this universe in which Sri Lanka build up a serious head of steam, and but I think the attack is going to be crucial to that. So that is how they're going to do it, if they're going to do it.
Bangladesh's problem, of course, is that they now have a negative net run rate in this group. So if no other games are played, Pakistan make it to the final, and I think there's a coin toss between India and Sri Lanka to decide the other finalist. I think that's the only way, only logical next step for this Asia Cup.
I'm looking out at a very rainy Colombo, skyscape right now. But I don't think it's going to be that bad that we're going to not see a single other match before the final. I don't think it's going to be that bad. I hope.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Of course, you've been very generous with your time. We've gone way over time, but the conversation was so good that I was like, you know what, we'll deal with it. But yeah, thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Danyal. And thank you, Eman, of course, for co-hosting the show with me. And thank you to all viewers for tuning in. For similar content, stay tuned. Brought to you by Grassroots Cricket.